Hello everyone, welcome back to my Anoat City Sewer toy box. I'm Professor Toybox and I've got Ezra Bridger with me, and today I'm continuing my work on this toy box, which is a recreation of the third mission of the 1994 Star Wars Dark Forces game. Today I'm going to be building the system here in the drainage pond that flushes you up through a long pipe back to the starting island. There's 4 different tunnels that lead into this area, so we need a way out of it. And I really want to implement the flushing mechanism that the original game had, because I think that'll be a lot of fun. So to save time, I've already gotten a head start on it, and I'll show you what I've got so far. So in the original game, you run into this little room, and there's a button in here that you'll push, and a door closes behind you, and an alarm goes off, and a few seconds after the alarm goes off, the water level rises. And it flushes you out through this long pipe, which carries you back over to the starting area over here. And as I said, I've already gotten a head start on this, and so I'll show you what I've done so far. So I've already added a path here and connected the water block up to it. So I added the path. The bottom point is at the water level at the bottom. Top point is flush with the pipe that we're going to be riding to get out of here. And of course I set the auto start off on the path and then connected the water block up to it and changed that to be one way and stop. One difference from the other ones that we've done in the last 2 videos is that under the properties I set the speed to be a maximum of 300, so the water level will rise fairly quickly. And that's a good thing because it has to go up a long ways. I also added another path here for the door, which is currently sitting down here in the open position. And this door will need to close when we enter the room and push the button. And when you ride up here and go through the pipe, we're going to use some weather vanes to guide us through this pipe, and I'll show you how to set those up. But I've added the trigger areas for this, and I've already done a lot of experimenting here to find the optimal placement for these. So I'll explain why they're positioned where they're positioned here when we get to that point. But I've added the trigger areas all along here. And I've also set up most of the weather vanes, except the first one. I'll set that one up in this video so you can see how to set it up. The rest of them are all set up the same way. And lastly, I took the sound generator, which had been sitting over here from an earlier video, and I moved that back over here because we're going to reuse that again, and this will make it a little bit easier to hook up. So right now that's sitting over here at the base of the vertical shaft. So this is where we are so far and where we're starting, and everything I've pretty much shown you with the water level and the path for that and the path for the door. We've seen that in the last few videos, so I didn't see the need to recreate that again. But as we get started, we'll go ahead and drop our button here. This will be the button that the player pushes to set everything in motion. And we're going to go ahead and hook this up first to the sound generator. So when this is pressed, we'll come back over here to the sound generator. And the sound I've chosen for this, there's several different possibilities you could use. The alarm is one, although I wasn't really happy with that. There's also a loud alarm down here that we just passed, and that one would work. The one I like a little better, though, is the school bell. That seems to be a little bit closer match to the original mission. And as we start out here, we come out and push the button. You can hear what that sounds like. Now in the original game, the alarm goes off about 3 times, so I don't really want to push this button 3 times. Kind of like that, and then the water level rises. And so in order to implement that, we're going to use a time delayer. And so I'm going to drop down a few time delayers here. And 2 of the time delayers I'm going to use for these sounds. There we go. And the other one I'll use at the end after the alarm has finished going off to set everything in motion. And we'll make this as the first one. So we'll set the properties, and I'm going to set the delay time to be 2 seconds. The alarm is just a little bit over a second, and there needs to be a gap between them. So we'll set that one at 2 seconds. We'll set the next one at 4 seconds. And the last one here, we're going to set the delay time on this to be, you guessed it, 6 seconds. And when you push the button, we're going to start all of those time delayers at the same time. So we'll go ahead and start that delay. We'll start that delay. And we'll start the other one as well. And now the first 2 time delayers, we're going to connect up to the sound generator. So when the delay is completed, come back over to the sound generator, and we need to use the exact same sound, which is the school bell, which of course is at the bottom of the list. It would be really nice to be able to wrap around to the top of this and get to it that way. Here's one. And on this one as well. So the button will kick off the first one. The first time delayer will go off 2 seconds later and kick off the second bell. And then 2 seconds after that, this time delayer will go off and trigger the school bell for a third time. So it'll go off 3 times. And then the last time delayer will kick the behavior off. But let's go ahead and see what we've got so far. There we go, and then the water level should start rising. So far so good. Now the last thing the button needs to do is when it's pressed, the first time we'll go ahead and close the door. So I'm going to come down here to the path for the door, and we're going to do reset and play. And I have the properties on this door. I think I showed you already, but that one is also set to 300. So the door will close very quickly. Doesn't give the player an opportunity to exit this room after pushing the button. Once you push that button, you're locked in. So the button will close the door and kick off all the time delayers. And the last time delayer, when it goes off, we're going to do a new logic connection. When that delay is completed, we're going to come over to our water block here, and we're going to do start. And that will start the water rising. Now, when we reach the top, we need to flush the user out through this pipe. And the mechanism we're going to use for that is going to be the weather vane. So we'll come over here, and we need 2 things actually. We need a locator, which will tell the weather vane what direction the wind needs to go. And we need the weather vane itself. And on the weather vane, we'll do a new locator connection. We'll connect that up to our locator. Again, that's the direction that the wind is going to go from the weather vane to this locator. And on the properties for the weather vane, we're going to set the force to be 40. That sets the speed to be about what it was in the original game. And the affected objects will just be the players. Ideally, I would have loved to have this be the triggering actor only, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to recognize that the button down there that kicked off the path, and when the path reaches the top, that triggers this, doesn't seem to get back to be the triggering actor, so we have to set this to be all players. And one of the limitations of this is going to be that because this is going to affect all players, this won't work really well if you've got 2 players in this toy box. and there's not really any way I can get around that. So this is going to be a single player toy box, basically. Okay, so the weather vane is set up. So now when we reach the top of this path, so on this point at the end of the path, we'll do a new logic connection. When the point is reached by the object on the path, we're going to come over to our weather vane and turn it on. And that will start the player moving this direction. And I kind of modified the opening here to add a couple of angled blocks to hopefully funnel the user in, so no matter where they are in this room, that'll help steer them into this tube. And I don't really need to connect this up to the block to get it to stop, because I set the block properties to be one way and stop for the movement style. So when it reaches this point, it's automatically going to stop. So the only thing I have to do on this point is turn on the weather vane when the block reaches here. So that starts the player moving down this path. And now we get to this trigger area. And I positioned this trigger area because the weather vanes are a little bit tricky. If I set this weather vane up, or this first weather vane up, so that when you enter this trigger area, it turns it off, the player, as soon as they reach this point here on the edge of this, will stop. Their momentum will not keep them moving forward. And I need the weather vane to keep going in order to help steer them around this corner. And so this trigger area is set up the way it is, so that when they enter this section at the start of the curve, we can come to our trigger area and do a new logic connection. When entered by player any, we'll come over to our weather vane over here, the second weather vane, and turn it on. And all of these weather vanes are set up exactly the same way as that other one. The properties are the same. They're each connected to a locator, which gives it the force of the direction that I want this to go. In this case, it's going to push me down this long tunnel. And so now when I enter this trigger area, and I'm at this point, this weather vane will start going. That weather vane back here is still running, and it's going to start steering the player diagonally around this corner. And initially I had this stretched out all the way over here to this corner. And the problem with that is once the player hits this wall, that kind of stops the player. Something about being up against the wall, even though this weather vane is running, prevents them from sliding down the corridor. So that's why the left edge of this trigger area is halfway in this tunnel. And likewise, I found that the edge of this here for the trigger area worked better here versus over there or in the middle of this angled block. It just seems to work better to guide the player around this. So when they enter this trigger area from this side, it turns that weather vane on. And when they exit the trigger area, either out this side or out this corner, we'll go ahead and turn the other one off. So when exited by player any, we'll come over to this one and turn that off. So again, to recap, the water reaches the top of this path. That turns on the weather vane over there, which pushes the player this direction. When they enter this trigger area, that turns this one on, which starts them moving this direction around the corner. When they exit the trigger area, that turns the other one off. And now, hopefully, the player will be moving kind of in the middle of this corridor down this direction. And when they get to this trigger area, we need to do the exact same thing. So when entered by player any, go ahead and turn this trigger, or this weather vane on. And likewise, when they exit this trigger area, player any, come back over here and turn this one off. And that will start them moving this direction. I'll come back to that other trigger area there in a moment. This one works the exact same way as the other two. So when entered by player, any, we'll come over to this weather vane, which is connected to that locator, and turn that one on. And likewise, when they exit this trigger area, player any, we'll turn this weather vane off over here. And that will then get them moving down this corridor towards the exit of the pipe and the starting island. Now we've also got this other pipe over here, and in the original game, as you come around this corner back here, if you hug this wall, the current would allow you to get into this area and get down this pipe. So I've positioned this so that if you can maneuver this way in time and enter this trigger area, I want to do the same thing that that one down there does. So when entered by player any, it'll turn on this trigger area. And when exited by player any, we'll turn this one off. And hopefully that will get you moving down this pipe. And in my experiments, I had a hard time getting you down the middle of this pipe. It wasn't really easy to do. Even putting the edge of the trigger area over here in the middle didn't seem to make a lot of difference. So I went ahead and just filled in the whole width of this. And the last trigger areas are out over here as you come out of the pipes. And one of the things that happened is if you set this up so that when you enter this trigger area, you turn that weather vane back there off. As soon as you enter it and the weather vane comes off, you drop straight down. And in the original game, it kind of kicks you out of this thing down into the middle of the water over here. So I stretched this out a little bit, and we're going to set it up so that when you exit this area by player any, then we come over and turn off the weather vane. And so as you enter that area, you're still up above a little ways, and so you're still traveling out away from the pipe, and it isn't until you drop out of this that the weather vane goes off. And so it gives you a little bit of a feeling of being kicked out the end of this, and you'll see that when I demonstrate it in a minute. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. So new logic connection when exited by player any. Come back over here and turn this weather vane off. And there we go. I think that's everything. Oh, one more thing is we need to reset the water level and the door down below. So once we come up this shaft and we're moving down this path, we can use this first trigger area here to do that. So when entered by player any, we'll go ahead and come over to our water block. And we'll do a reset and stop. And that'll put that back down there for the next time we ride this through. And likewise, new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll go ahead and reopen the door. So we'll do a reset and stop on that as well. And that'll reset the chamber for the next time we come through the drainage pond. And let's see, anything else? I'm just reviewing my notes. I think that's everything. So let's go ahead and give this a try. So I'll come out over here into the drainage pond. So here we are, we're down here, we're battling some enemies, and the only way to get out of here is to come into this room and push the button. And up goes the water. And out we go through the pipe and down the long corridor. And you get hung up on the wall, as you can see. And out we go. Hey, what a ride. Well, that's not too bad. It works pretty smooth, except when you get hung up on a wall, but I don't think there's anything I can do about that. The other limitation is that it only works with a single player, as I said. With two players, it only works if both players are in the little starting room when the button's pressed. And even then, it probably isn't going to be very smooth because you'll have two players entering and exiting the trigger areas, and the weather vanes won't turn on and off at the proper time for both players. If you really want to play this with two players, I would forego the weather vanes and just let the players run back through the long pipe. Or since that will probably be a boring trip, you could add a teleporter that'll take them back to the roof of the starting island and skip the pipe altogether. Anyway, I think we're finally getting close to the end of this toy box. All I have left to do is to set up the enemy troop placements, implement the remaining doors and elevator platforms, and then put the ceiling on. I'll do that offline and show you the results next time. Meanwhile, if you haven't already done so, be sure to sign up on my blog or subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can follow my progress on this toy box and see what other toy boxes I build next. You'll also find floor plans, logic diagrams, and other build tips on my blog that will help you to recreate my toy boxes on your own console or PC. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.